Hello, my name is Avery Dorsey, and here's my persuasive speech with my live audience of 6 people. I think many men and women can agree that the most terrible and degrading thing that can happen to oneself is being raped. What is even more scaring is knowing that only about 6% of rapists ever serve a day in jail, found on cmsac.org as of 2020. Most people would agree with me when I say that this is absurd, but what most people don't think about is, what if it's not true? What if the man or woman who is being accused is actually innocent? How will their lives change? There have been many cases where there has been evidence to prove that certain rape accusations were, in fact, made up, and yet nothing was done legally to said accuser. Meanwhile, the accused person's life has now just taken a 180 and is most likely over. There have been many examples of this when it comes to pro athletes, even some at the collegiate level. In an act to make the right decision, most colleges or sports teams will let the athlete go right away as a result of the allegations, so people know that will not be tolerated there, which is exactly what Sacred Heart University did when 2 of their football players were accused of rape. On October 15th, police were dispatched to St. Vincent's Medical Center for a sexual assault complaint. Police said Nikki Jovino told them she had attended a Sacred Heart Football Club party the night before at a house at Lakeside Drive. Jovino claimed she was repeatedly raped by 2 Sacred Heart University football players in a tiny basement bathroom while the party raged on. This was found on ctpost.com on February 24, 2017 by Daniel Tepfer. Both football players were immediately removed from the team and kicked out of the school. It wasn't until months later when Nikki confessed to making up these allegations against said football players. Jovino was charged with second-degree false reporting of an incident and tampering with or fabricating physical evidence, ctpost.com. Nikki ended up being released after posting a $150,000 bond. That's simple. A slap on the wrist, if you may. These poor young men's lives have been permanently changed for the worse because this young lady decided to make up such an evil lie for her greater good. Yes, the players ended up being allowed back on the team and into the school, but what about the months of training they lost and the months of academics? And most importantly, the reputation. If their names weren't hidden by the school, that would be the first thing that came up every time you Googled them. I think this should be a felony in all cases, since the consequence for rape should be a felony as well. Now, what happens if the accuser who made false accusations doesn't confess, though? Brian Banks, an NFL player, unfortunately found out what happened the hard way. Brian Banks was a 16-year-old in the summer of 2002, 6'2", 220-pound linebacker with speed at Powerhouse Long Beach Polytech High School in Southern California, as promising a football player as any high school kid in the country. As one of the most highly recruited middle linebackers in the nation, he had a verbal commitment to play on full scholarship for Pete Carroll at USC. This was found on www.newyorkdailynews.com. He seemed to have it all, until one fatal day at school. He claimed that him and a friend, Juanita Gibson, went to a secret spot at school to make out, and then before he knew it, by the end of the day, he was being taken away in handcuffs due to sexual assault charges. He claims they only kissed and never had sex. He was unable to pay his bond, which was worth over $1 million. Banks spent a year in jail before his case even went to trial. He debated pleading guilty to a crime he didn't commit just so he could face less time, or he could risk it all to prove his innocence. Years later, he was finally released, but still had the label as a sex offender, which, as you know, that does not allow you to get many jobs. Years later, he was finally released. He was checking his Facebook and saw a friend request from Juanita. In complete shock, he asked her why she would do this, and she said she wanted to put him in the past. He later got her to admit that he did not rape her. Juanita never faced any charges. Her word was only used to get Banks off the hook. This man had his whole life changed over a simple lie made by who he thought was a friend.